Thank you. Thank you all for coming at the end of the day. And I'd really like to give you an update on where we are with NRX and some things that have happened recently that are even surprising to us. And clearly, the things that I'm telling you are what we know to be true today. The facts will continue to change under our feet. And please pay attention to the safe harbor statement with regard to forward-looking statements. But we're a biotech that actually has a little bit of 2025 revenue, and we anticipate more. So we began developing drugs in 2015, focused on suicidal depression and PTSD, working both with intravenous ketamine and a fixed-dose combination of D-cycloserine lorazepam. You may have seen a press release earlier this week that FDA has given us a GDUFA date of July 2026 for completing the review of our intravenous ketamine. And we're continuing to pursue a new drug application for a PDUFA date, in other words, innovative claims around use of ketamine for treating suicidality. FDA has granted us fast track designation on that application. So if we just get the ANDA market, for ketamine is currently about $750 million. Right now, most of the ketamine sold is manufactured overseas, and all of it has a toxic preservative in it called benzethonium chloride. We've petitioned the FDA to get that preservative out, so we believe we have a good shot at increasing our market share within that market should the GDUFA be granted in July. NRX-101, fixed-dose combination of D-cycloserine lorazepam. We originally began developing it at fairly high doses of cycloserine for treatment of bipolar depression. FDA gave us breakthrough designation on that drug. But as it's recently turned out, at low doses of D-cycloserine, you see a doubling of the effect of transcranial magnetic stimulation. And that has suddenly created a new market for that drug that we announced this morning. And finally, Hope Therapeutics is a network of interventional psychiatry clinics that we're incubating. We'll have the first 6 clinics operating by year-end 2025. You're already seeing revenue showing up on our P&L starting last quarter. And it's because we realized that medicines alone are not sufficient for suicidal depression, for PTSD, for these CNS diseases that most affect humanity. And that only by combining neuroplastic drugs, devices, and other therapies are we going to be able to do what needs to be done for our patients. Now, you may say, well, who's ever done that before? We've never heard of somebody doing drugs and devices under the same roof, and we've certainly never heard of people combining it with owning clinics. Well, you can look at a $37 billion German company called Fresenius that did exactly that in turning dialysis into a reliable and reproducible technology that benefits patients and is more likely to help patients than harm them. So there is a precedent, even though that precedent is several thousand-fold greater than we are right now. Why are we doing this? Because suicide is a national crisis that kills more than 50,000 Americans every year. An American dies of suicide every 11 minutes, according to the CDC. 13 million people seriously contemplated suicide last year. 3.8 million people made a plan to commit suicide. 1.6 million people attempted suicide. And we think of that as some sort of weakness of the person, but it's not. Suicide is really a neurological short circuit in the brain. 17 years ago, I found myself sitting with the daughter of a dear friend the night before his funeral, saying, if your dad had a short circuit in his heart and died from it, this would be a terrible day, but we wouldn't be blaming him. You need to understand that he had a short circuit in his brain and had no more control over how he died than if he died of a heart attack. Uh, Dr. Nolan Williams said this far more eloquently, and Nolan was the inventor of the TMS Saint protocol. That's the first transcranial magnetic stimulation protocol to really demonstrate very high rates of response and remission from suicidal depression. And you can, read Nolan's words about the neural circuitry that underlie negative mood that can overwhelm the person to the point where death results. And ironically, Nolan took his own life just several weeks ago. Now, suicide is probably the only major cause of death that afflicts Americans where we've not bent the survival curve in a positive way. The likelihood that somebody diagnosed with breast cancer today will survive is many-fold higher than it was when I went to medical school in 1978. Prostate cancer rarely kills people compared to its previous mortality rate. Influenza deaths are astronomically lower than they were when I went to medical school. Even vehicular crashes are much less likely to kill people today. Suicide, on the other hand, as a cause of death, is increasing. And for the first time, we're starting to understand the biology of suicide.
What was the source of that data?
CDC, you can find it on their website. Question was, what was the source of the data I just quoted? It's from the US Centers for Disease Control. So suicidal depression is a short circuit in the brain that we now are starting to understand. We've identified the role of the NMDA receptor, but more importantly, we're starting to understand that loss of neuroplasticity is at the cause of all of these. We know that ketamine and other drugs target the NMDA receptor and achieve a 50% or greater clinical response rate. We've seen similar response rates from transcranial magnetic stimulation. But only by combining these treatments in an effective manner can we reach the 80 and 90% response rates that we really want to be able to offer people who come to us. And it's important to understand what neuroplasticity is because it's really a new concept. And in depression and PTSD, brain cells lose their ability to reach out and make new connections to other brain cells. So we think of the brain as a computer, except it's not a digital computer. If you take a wafer of silicon, etch 10 million transistors into that wafer, you can turn those transistors on or off by programming. That's what we call software. But you'll never change the underlying circuits unless you smash the wafer with a hammer. The brain is not like that at all. The brain is constantly making new connections between other brain cells, and that's how thoughts are formed, that's how memories are stored. And when that process of neuroplasticity stops, you get, depending on where in the brain you have loss of neuroplasticity, you may get depression, you may get PTSD, you may get autism, you may get Parkinson's disease, you may get cognitive decline. All of these are increasingly being recognized as loss of neuroplasticity. Now, the psychedelic drugs that everybody's so excited about, that may be a misguided notion. It may be, and it's increasingly being found, that the reason these drugs work is because they cause neuroplasticity in the brain. They all bind to the 5-HT2A, B, or C receptor. And it may be that the hallucination that everybody notices from these drugs is really a side effect. And the reason I say that is because there's already a new generation of non-hallucinogenic drugs binding to this receptor that are causing profound effects on diseases like depression. So it's all about creating neuroplasticity, whether you do it with a drug, whether you do it with TMS, whether you do it with a hyperbaric chamber. And this whole area of science is rapidly replacing the aging generation of SSRI drugs. There are 125 of them approved for depression. Every one of them causes suicide. And not only do they cause suicide, but they don't work very well. The SPEC study finally showed that these antidepressants maybe work 30% of the time, whereas we're talking about new technology with 80 and 90% response rates. So our perspective is that only a combination of neuroplastic therapies is going to provide a durable solution for patients. Really a total care umbrella that starts with having some sort of therapeutic framework that engages the patient, that keeps the patient, in the system, where we can apply, ketamine and other neuroplastic medicines. Ketamine is wonderful for very rapid responses, but you're talking about a drug that over time is hallucinogenic, it's addictive, it's neurotoxic, can't be given by mouth. I think ketamine should never be thought of as a long-term drug, but as a rapid drug for inducing remission, it's an amazing drug. Transcranial magnetic stimulation and other neuromodulatory therapies that I'll talk about help to achieve that long-term benefit, together with digital therapeutics and hyperbaric oxygen therapy. And the most important thing to understand is that, this notion of, well, these are diseases of behavioral health and that's different from real diseases, that's just nonsense. Post-traumatic stress disorder demonstrates brain lesions with inflammation and other characteristics of traumatic wounds of the brain. The way we know that is, it probably doesn't surprise anybody to know that, rats have a huge aversion to cats and anything that smells like a cat, especially cat urine. And that's because over the course of evolution, rats have, learned that cat urine means death, and you're going to get eaten, and therefore get away from it, because those rats that didn't know that got eaten and didn't reproduce. So if you want to give a rat PTSD, put a vial of cat urine in the rat's cage for an hour, and that's the rat model of PTSD, and you will see a brain wound in that rat with inflammatory cells and necrotic tissue and all the other hallmarks of any physical wound. And you can actually help that wound with hyperbaric therapy and with other neuroplastic therapies. So the notion that, there's something wrong with the people who have PTSD, that it's, sort of a behavioral problem and not a neurophysiologic problem, we need to kill that notion. Uh, and you can actually see on, functional magnetic resonance imaging, uh, clear differences between suicidal patients and normal, what I shouldn't say normal patients, but patients who don't have active suicidal ideation. Now, the problem is there's no FDA-approved medicine for suicidal ideation today. The only FDA-approved treatment is electroconvulsive therapy, which can be effective, but it's highly toxic. It's well known to uh, destroy short-term memory, to have other toxic side effects. And we've already seen one very important clinical trial showing that when you administer intravenous ketamine randomized against electroconvulsive therapy, uh, you see just as good an effect. Now, nasal S-ketamine is approved, but it doesn't reduce suicidality. The label says so very clearly. So if you want to understand the biology, what happens is these drugs block the NMDA receptor, which is a very well understood calcium channel in the brain, and you see very rapid decreases in depression and suicidality. But more importantly, there's biologic proof that when you administer ketamine, and this is, think of this as a prototype for this whole new world of neuroplastic drugs that's coming along, you can see the dendrites, the little terminal bulbs on the nerve cells that create connections to other nerve cells, start to sprout. You can actually see that neuroplasticity, happening in a petri dish. So we're looking at real physiologic effects, and uh, and there's some real efficacy data out there. Among the data that we're bringing to FDA, There's a French government-funded trial, 156 patients, 7 hospitals, 84% remission from suicidality on ketamine versus 28% on placebo in patients with bipolar depression, and important differences in remission with other forms of depression. An NIH-funded study that randomized 96 patients and showed this dramatic difference between ketamine and an active comparator midazolam, uh, with an odds ratio of 5. Uh, and when you took the people who got midazolam and didn't respond and gave them ketamine, they then responded as if they'd gotten ketamine in the first place. And then the study I just talked about comparing electroconvulsive therapy to ketamine. But not only has this drug been shown to be effective in randomized clinical trials, there's now more than 65,000 patients of confirmatory real-world data showing rapid and sustained response from suicidality. And when I say sustained, really over the short term, because ketamine is a short-term drug, but profound effects that can be used for the benefit of patients. Now, what we've done is we've developed a preservative-free version of ketamine because every vial of ketamine sold in the U.S. today has uh, a toxic preservative in it called benzethonium chloride. And benzethonium chloride has never been shown to be safe by FDA. It's not on the GRAS list, and FDA is concerned about it to the point where it's not allowed to be used in hand cleansers and topical antiseptics. But way back in the 1970s, when these old drugs were formulated, it was put in as a preservative because they used to use the same vial of drug for more than one patient, multi-dose vial. And they put these preservatives in so that continually introducing a needle into the vial wouldn't contaminate it. Well, you can't do that anymore. There's no more multi-dosing in a hospital. So we've brought out the first preservative-free ketamine. People said you couldn't keep it sterile, you couldn't keep it stable without benzethonium chloride. We've proven that that's not true. So we've got patent protection around that. And that generates potential for very substantial sales of what's a fairly old drug. The current generic ketamine market is about $750 million a year. And if we're able to get a new drug application approved to add the psychiatric claims to the old ketamine label, then you're talking about a multi-billion-dollar market. So as we announced earlier this week, the FDA has now accepted our file for the generic application. Their exact words were that the submission is substantially complete. The review is proceeding, and they've given us a July 2026 date for finalization of the review, which is FDA speak for if the review is successful, you can market your drug. So we expect to be a revenue-producing pharmaceutical company in 2026, or at least we aim to be a revenue-producing pharmaceutical company in 2026. Yes?
So can I ask a question about 2026? Now, you're gonna have a product that's ready to go to market. Are you gonna do the manufacturing yourselves?
We already are doing the manufacturing in partnership with a company called Nephron Pharmaceuticals in West Columbia, South Carolina. We've made multiple commercial batches. We have more than 2 years of shelf stability and aim to have 3 years of shelf stability by the time we sell our first vial. But more importantly, we're doing high throughput manufacturing in what's called a blow fill seal environment. All the ketamine sold today is in a glass vial. Pharmaceutical grade glass is expensive, it's sometimes hard to get, and the bottling lines for pharmaceutical grade glass can make sort of 10,000, 100,000 units a month. Blow fill seal is a technology where you take polyester resin, you heat it up, you blow it into a little vial, you fill that vial with medicine, you seal the vial, you shrink wrap the vial. No human being touches it until it's sitting in a pallet.
5 minutes?
until it's sitting in a pallet on a loading dock. This is a 30-minute presentation, and I planned on 30 minutes, so I think that's what we're going to do.
Well,
Uh,
I would say 25.
NRX-101 is an oral fixed-dose combination of D-cycloserine and lurasidone that has breakthrough therapy designation for treatment of suicidal bipolar depression. And it's the first antidepressant to demonstrate reduced akathisia and suicidality in multiple clinical trials. But what's more important is that all currently marketed antidepressants have a black box warning saying, caution, this drug may cause suicide. NRX-101 is the first drug that's ever been shown in clinical trials to reduce, the first oral drug to reduce suicidality. And we've got several phase 2 trials that have demonstrated that pretty convincingly, at least to us. We hope they'll continue to demonstrate that to the FDA. Not only have we reduced suicidality, but we've reduced the side effect called akathisia, which is well known to be associated with suicidality. And we have fairly robust composition of matter patents, more than 70 of them around the world. What's new is that it now turns out that that same drug, that same D-cycloserine, more than doubles the effect of transcranial magnetic stimulation. And to the point where an independent group of investigators reported an 87% response rate and a 72% remission rate when D-cycloserine plus TMS was applied in patients with severe depression. And you can see that study cited in our recent filings. Not only did it decrease depression, double the incidence of decreasing depression, but it had a profound effect on decreasing suicidality. D-cycloserine plus transcranial magnetic stimulation has more than twice the effect in reducing suicidality than transcranial magnetic stimulation alone. And that's why we founded Hope Therapeutics, to build a total care umbrella that can combine ketamine and other neuroplastic drugs with TMS, with digital therapeutics, and with hyperbaric oxygen therapy. Now you may say, well, what does hyperbaric have to do with any of this? Well, remember I said PTSD is a wound in the brain. Suicidality is a wound in the brain. So the Israelis actually said, well, if it's a wound in the brain, it should respond to hyperbaric therapy just like other wounds. And they started treating Israeli soldiers with PTSD with hyperbaric therapy, and in fact demonstrated a 40% reduction on the CAPS scale, which is the worldwide approved scale for measuring PTSD. Right now, in a center in Israel, they're putting 200 soldiers with PTSD every day into hyperbaric chambers because it's the only therapy that's ever been shown to really impact battlefield PTSD. And probably for two reasons. Probably because hyperbaric therapy improves neuroplasticity, but also because it may be the only therapy that activates dormant stem cells in the brain. So that's our approach to integrating treatment. That's why we're setting up clinics that are combining these therapies for soldiers, for first responders. You know, if you look at a police officer who's got PTSD, who needs antidepressants, that person has to turn in his weapon, can't be on duty. And we have clinics that are showing the ability to return people like that to active duty and to do it promptly. So that's us in a nutshell. I hope to have even more to tell you when I see you next year.
With more than 6,000 small and micro cap companies listed, if you're looking for the next Apple, then Channel Check truly is your trade. It's an investor community where you can access independent Wall Street research, advanced market data, balanced news, corporate videos, and podcasts. You You can even register to attend in-person Meet the Management Series lunches, and to be part of the preeminent annual Small and Microcap Investor Conference, NobleCon. And here's the best news. Since Channel Check is sponsored by the featured companies, premium membership requires no investment. It's absolutely free. So check it out. Log in today. Find out why Channel Check is North America's leading source of research on the companies that just may change the world.